St. Patrick's Day in the Boston area, and for somebody who is recovering from alcoholism, it's a lonely and difficult experience that really makes you question, can Sam make it past 62 days of sobriety? With not being able to drink, Sam doesn't even realize St. Patrick's Day is coming. It just kind of encroaches on her, and with that, she's kind of scrambling for a means to distract herself from what's going on. People at her job are already pre-gaming. There's the issue that Felicia is unavailable because she's trying to party. And even when it comes to Bob and Carol, they have plans, so they can't really help Sam, distract herself either. So Olivia. So all that Olivia can really do is just tell her, try not to be alone. And of course, she tries to offer herself up, but Stefani likes boundaries, and she doesn't appreciate Olivia keep having it where when it comes to Sam and whoever else that Olivia is sponsoring, she keeps allowing them to possibly get too involved in their lives. Especially since for those two, Stefani is about to potentially try to have a child, even though she doesn't seem all that excited about it. So when it comes to, having Sam possibly join them, it's like, nuh-uh, this is one of our final hurrahs before we really get into IVF and all that, so let's not get this young woman who clearly has a lot going on involved in our stuff. As you can imagine, it's not just a bad day when it comes to Sam. Other people are also struggling, and other people being Mindy and James. Now, James is just shopping at Giovanni's when he runs into Mindy, and despite, Mindy kind of seeming like she has friends and also that she doesn't really like to associate people who's not fashionable, with James struggling and then both being part of Club 24/7 in terms of their AA meetings, she decides to hang out with him for the day, and with that, they bond quite well. In fact, I would even want to note that their bond is so cute that it almost makes you wonder, do I still want to invest in the idea of Sam and James getting together, or should I ship a new couple? Because these two got something going on where his opposites attract in terms of James being this IT nerd kind of guy and Mindy being this fashionista. Yet, as they bond over video games and even beer pong, which is mainly just so James can get his keys from his friends who force him to play, you're kind of thinking like, you know what, there's chemistry here that I wasn't expecting, and I quite like it. For the final topic, it is us going into what Sam figures out as something to do in order to distract herself. What happens is, despite Olivia's warnings not to, Sam goes on her Instagram. She finds a story about Britt trying on dresses. She makes a comment, and with that, Britt invites her to the bridal store, and Sam goes. This is both weird to Britt's friends and also the bridal owner, who thought she was done so that she can finally go out partying for St. Patrick's Day, but such is the case, it isn't. It's not going to happen for her. Instead, Sam gets involved, starts noting how none of these dresses fit what Britt would probably be looking for, since Britt might be more of a suit girl than a dress girl, and unfortunately, when it comes to that, the bridal store doesn't have it, and it kind of leaves you finally understanding why Britt and Sam are friends, since while Britt's girlfriend's possibly her sister, cousin, I forget what she is, while they're enablers in terms of being yes women, like yes, that's beautiful, that's cute, yada yada yada, Sam is the only one who's willing to give an opinion that's possibly not favorable. And maybe in the long term, that might have been I don't want to say attraction because that's the wrong word, but that might have been what kept that friendship going, since if Britt ever needed an honest opinion, she can get it from Sam, and in terms of what Sam got from Britt, as Sam notes, she learned a little bit of Creole through hanging out with Britt and things like that, so there's a chance that whatever Sam didn't get from her family, or even just from her mother, she got from Britt's, and it definitely makes you understand why Sam, especially now, is so desperate to get back in Britt's good graces, and maybe it's just getting access to that family environment again, especially with her father being gone and her mother still very iffy about getting too much a part of Sam's journey. The first highlight for us is Bob's kindness towards Carol, and that's mainly due to Bob's not faltering as a good guy. And he's not like a good guy in terms of you thinking that down the road he's gonna flip on you. He seems like a genuine good person who, when him and Carol have alone time because Sam is out with Britt, he proposes him having sex, and because it's been a while for Carol and she's a bit insecure about how her body looks now, especially to present it to a new person, she's not really in that place yet to be like that with Bob. And rather than him make it an issue or even kind of put it like we don't have a lot of time to ourselves, we need to take this moment now, instead he's very calm, he's cool about it, and offers to rub her feet. So it presents a different kind of intimacy when it comes to those two. And it really makes it so, as much as you can recognize there's a lot of cute couples on here, they're starting to seem like one of the only pure ones, even if sometimes you think Carol doesn't deserve this kind of relationship. But one of the things that I think might get brought up down the line is, when it comes to Sam's dad, Carol's husband, there is a question of, was he a better father than he was a husband, or flipping that, was he a better husband than a father? Because they don't talk about him enough, or really at all. And when it comes to Carol, the way she kind of approaches Sam's dad is, you don't get the sense that she was in love with him, like over the top love when he died. Yes, she had a grieving period, but there's just this desire to know how is Sam's dad, to understand what his role is, and not only Sam's alcoholism, but also who Carol is as a person, especially considering these insecurities that she brings up. Did he put those in there, or is it really just because, being with a man for decades and now having to introduce your body to a new one was no longer as youthful, or how you remember it, is a bit difficult to do. The next highlight for us is just Mindy, and I would say Mindy featuring James, because Mindy as a whole, this episode shows that she's underutilized. We've mostly seen her interact with Sam, and that's been pretty good in terms of being a comical, boss and employee situation. But with James, she got a bit more to play with and even involved in a way. Now, on one hand, as an individual, I really do appreciate how the writers decided to speak about Mindy's discovery of being trans through video games, since video games are perhaps one of the first times as a kid you really get to craft somebody into your image or what you want to look like. Whether it's being a boy or girl, or as we increasingly see, picking someone who's non-binary who could possibly, I think in Cyberpunk 2022, you can have male genitals but have a bosom, or at least I think when he was doing previews they showed you can do that. It's been a while, so I can't really remember, but the point is, video games are strangely a good entryway idea for the writers to tap into, for somebody understanding how they truly feel inside rather than what they were physically assigned to by doctors, their parents, and etc. So that in itself was a good and unique way to present Mindy, especially in terms of showing that beyond being a fashionista, she's also a bit of a gamer, even if it's just a Pokemon type of game. But bringing James back into the fold, I didn't really expect them to be this cute couple yet. At the same time, you kind of have to recognize when it comes to this show, opposites attract have kind of been a thing. Olivia and Stefani are definitely opposites, because Stefani, she seems a bit more extroverted and quite annoying, if I may be honest, than Olivia, who's definitely a bit more subtle. Then when it comes to Bob and Carol, yes, they're both middle-aged, but Bob is clearly much more extroverted and friendly than Carol may ever be. So, in a way, you might be surprised initially by Mindy and James having good chemistry, but it seems like this show has cast most of its characters to kind of fit into that opposites attracting. But I would say it even goes further, because it's not just the opposites attracting, but their dynamic, their banter was kind of cute. And it really makes me wonder when it comes to Sam, because we know based on previews that Sam and James hook up again. Is Mindy kind of gonna be entering a triangle? Is James gonna have a little thing with Sam, realize she's not ready, and then maybe go to Mindy because, she did the work? There's a lot of questions to ask, and all I hope is that Mindy and this whole thing we saw in this episode doesn't go to the wayside, because that would be quite upsetting if she just gets regulated to being Sam's boss when clearly there's so much more she can do. I mean, really just going on a tangent right now. There was a New Fest movie, New Fest being a film festival, that had a short. There was a short at New Fest, I believe it's called Pink and Blue, that the actress who played Mindy was in, and just seeing what they was able to do on that, and now seeing what they got to do with James in this episode, as well as interact with Sam, it really does make you think that Mindy needs to be bigger than she is. And I don't know whose screen time they need to sacrifice in order to do that, but they need to make it happen. The last highlight is just thinking that there might be hope for Sam and Britt. Up until now, I really did not understand why Sam was going so hard to get back in Britt's life. Never mind why Britt was even willing to let Sam try to get back in her life and make amends. Yet, in this episode, it kind of makes sense. We do not know what Sam's home life was like when her dad was alive, but we do know how it is now with her mother, and clearly that relationship is cordial, but it's not as loving as Sam probably wants it to be. This is compared to what Britt probably had, where, being that she's Haitian, and also in Haiti and the Caribbean, it was probably very family oriented, loud, all types of food, and I would imagine the type of loving environment that Sam probably wanted. And losing that was probably the main issue for Sam, and of course losing Britt as well, since that was her access to that family. But also, while we won't discount what Felicia brings to Sam's life, I do think you can't discount that in terms of Sam's trajectory, when it comes to her writing, her moving to New York and all that, Britt is probably a bit more aligned with that type of trajectory in life compared to Felicia, who works at a cosmetology type of situation. I think it was a hair salon, nail salon, one of those type of things. So, as much as you can't discount Felicia being there for her best friend and all that she brings, Britt gives Sam something different that cannot be denied. Now, as for the flip side, as we mentioned earlier, what Sam brings is that kind of Felicia vibe in terms of being very much with the truth, being very blunt with it, and I think that's not something that Britt has access to with a lot of the people that she deals with. At least if you go by what we saw in that bridal shop, her friends were more focused on drinking and having a good time than it was focusing on what dress would be best for Britt, especially since Britt, based off of the way Sam sees her, isn't someone who enjoys lace. She's not necessarily a dress person, and clearly might be the only person who actually gets Britt. While these other people, they're cool, but they're not necessarily close. It's just that in this moment, they are what she has. So, it's not clear what's going to happen with that relationship in the long run, but at the very least, now we understand why both parties are interested in possibly getting back to friendship, and we have some reason to kind of invest in the idea of them getting back to where they used to be, but of course in a better place. Overall, you definitely have to appreciate that at 60 days accomplished, Sam is making good progress toward figuring out how to be sober. And while she does have multiple triggers around her, she seemingly has figured out how to navigate things. And as shown at the end of this episode, when she meets up with James and Mindy, there is a chance that she may have found new people and new means to deal with this drastic change in her life. But with seeing that clock every episode, counting how many days she has, eventually a relapse is going to happen. It's just the question of when she possibly slips. Is it going to be a major slip, or is it just going to be a minor one where you can easily forgive it because of the situation?